So you may have noticed yesterday, all of my knowledge of Warhammer comes from 40K, and it has been brought to my attention that Warhammer Fantasy is pretty different. So I'm gonna try and get caught up for next time we play. It probably won't help me play any better, but at least it'll give you context for why I'm getting my ass kicked. This guy, I've watched a lot of his 40K videos, so let's see what he has to say about fantasy.
Hi gang, once, long ago, there was a world, an old world.
Oh, that actually hasn't changed. There is still currently a world. I happen to live on it.
A world consumed in the fires of rebranding mostly, but it's back. The old world game is out and the world of legend has returned. So in this video, let's peer back into the mists of time and run through the history of the old world. If you're relatively new to Warhammer or Age of Sigmar, you might not recognize the old world, but the story I'm going to tell in this video has been around for a long time. Before Age of Sigmar, Games Workshop's flagship fantasy game, in fact the original Warhammer game, was called Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Its setting was a single planet, the Warhammer world. No, not that one. And most of its storylines took place on a single continent of.
Oh, so this is the original Warhammer game, by Games Workshop at least. And this is basically our world, it looks like. Like Albion, that's England. This whole place is Europe, obviously, and down there was Africa. The Darklands, no, that's to be over by New Jersey.
That planet, called the Old World, in the same way that explorers in the Age of Sail called America the New World. Over 8 editions of this game, its stories were fleshed out and it acquired thousands of years of history, all of which ended when the game was discontinued in 2015. The Warhammer world was destroyed. That was actually written into the story, and its inhabitants made their way into the new Mortal Realms, the setting for its replacement, Age of Sigmar. But now, it's back. Games Workshop have released a new game called, slightly confusingly, The Old World, and the legends and histories of yore have been resurrected like a happy Nehekaran skeleton. So, armed with a copy of the Old World rulebook, let's retell the creation myth of this huge setting and find out how all its factions came to be.
So the world existed, it was destroyed. People went to the new world, Narnia style, and now we're going back? Is it like just stories that took place before the end times, or they'll probably answer it.
But before I start, some disclaimers. First, there's a lot of worlds floating about, so let's just clarify. This place, the entire planet, used to be called the Warhammer world, but now seems to be called the World of Legend. That's the setting, like the Mortal Realms. This continent on it is called the Old World, and that's where the game takes place, so the game's called the Old World too. But in this video, I'm going to tell the story of kind of the entire planet, more or less. Second, although all of this stuff is heavily based on the original Warhammer Fantasy Battle setting, we shouldn't assume it's exactly the same. We don't know how much is being kept or what will change. So for that reason, though I'm going to use imagery from across all editions, all the lore in this video comes directly from the Old World gamebooks. This is the story as it is now.
Oh, so it's kind of like a reboot.
The Old World game is set around the year 2276 of the Imperial calendar, but our story begins millennia before that, and like so many Games Workshop settings, it begins with some magic space frogs. The Old Ones came into the world around
Oh, with those
17,000
damn
years
space
ago.
frogs.
They were an incredibly powerful species of travelers, able to move from world to world in great silver ships, and for whatever reason, they had decided that this place would be perfect for whatever unknowable froggy schemes they had. What they found was a cold world orbiting far from its star and dominated by giant creatures, leviathans of the deep, tunneling beasts, great gargants, many of them intelligent, and the most powerful were the dragons. But none of them could stand against the Old One's magic.
Yeah, dragons just tend to be the most powerful in any fantasy setting. When you introduce dragons into something, that has a lot of literary and cultural significance. Like if you have a weak dragon in your story, you've probably done something wrong, or you have done something incredibly new and unique. No, probably not new, but you know what I mean.
They built networks of nodes, great world engines to reshape the continents. They moved the entire planet closer to its star, warming the climate, and armies of lizard men and their slan overseers, the servants of the Old Ones, forced the beasts back into the dark places of the world, all except one. The celestial dragon, who, instead of fighting the Old Ones, chose to observe and learn from them. Over the
Can't
next
beat 'em.
9,000 years, the Old Ones seeded the world with new species. First, the magical elves on their island of Ulthuan, then the dwarves through the World's Edge Mountains in the Old World, and later the primitive tribes of men, and finally the halflings and the ogres, and more crept in too. Stowed away on the great silver ships of the Old Ones were the first orcs and goblins who escaped into this new planet. The species thrived, and this reshaping continued for millennia, but
So obviously the old ones are also present in 40K. I wonder if these are the same old ones as in 40K, which would probably also mean those orcs are the same as the ones from 40K. Obviously 40K came after Warhammer Fantasy, but that doesn't necessarily mean in universe, you know what I mean?
8,000 years before the present day, something went wrong. The Old One's power came from a strange other dimension that they manipulated to their will like magic. At the poles of this new world, they constructed two great gates, portals into this other realm that allowed them to come and go as they
The
pleased.
warp?
But there were things that lived in this other dimension,
Yeah,
and
it's
they
the warp.
whispered at the door, eager to get through. They whispered on the winds of magic that flowed from the gates, corrupting some of the younger races into believing they were gods. With every mortal corrupted, their power grew until the great portals bent and broke, shattering into rifts in reality, great ragged holes into the realm of chaos, a storm of magical energy pouring out over the world, so powerful that a new moon was formed in the sky. Morsleib, the Chaos Moon, made from raw black warpstone, the solidified energy of chaos. In the
That's
few
no
hundred
moon.
years after this cataclysm, the Old Ones disappeared, and many of the older Slan, the ones who knew their master's plans, were killed attempting to stabilize the world. Chaos swept over the land, infecting the soil and twisting the creatures of the forests into mutants, legions of demons pouring from the poles, and the first war against chaos began. Hordes of demons fought legions of lizard men as the servants of the Old Ones attempted to preserve what was left of their master's plans, but the temple cities were overrun, and the Slan pushed back to the southern continent of Lustria. But they didn't fight alone. In the World's Edge
A lot of those names look Aztec in origin.
Mountains, Grungni, ancestor god of the dwarves, urged his people to fortify their holds, and Grimnir, the warrior god, led huge armies that marched from their mountains to hold back the tide. In the land of Ulthuan, the elven wanderer Ainarian cast himself into the sacred flame of their creator god, Azurian, emerging unscathed as the first Phoenix King of the Elves, and alongside the mage Calidor, united his people, the glittering hosts of the elves winning winning many victories against the darkness. And in the Far East, the last of the great dragons, the celestial dragon, who'd learned from the old ones, looked down upon the primitive tribes of men and took pity on them, fighting back the demonic hordes and insulating them from the worship of gods and monsters. The war continued for hundreds of years, with great losses on both sides. In Ulthuan, a demonic incursion killed Astariel, the ever-queen of Ainarian, and stole away his 2 children. The Phoenix King became a vengeful
Queen. His. Freudian slip?
figure, drawing the blade Widowmaker from the shrine of the war god Cain and setting up court in dark Nagaraith to the west of the island with his new queen, Morathi. Mountain holds were lost, overwhelmed as their dwarven defenders fell, and in Lustria, the great capital of Itza came under siege from an army of demons. All seemed lost until, in a year described in this calendar handily as -4420, I know, 3 things happened. In Itza, the oldest of the Slan, Lord Croak, finally died. But, set free from its body, Croak became more powerful than ever and banished the besieging demon hordes. In the old world, Grimnir, enraged at the loss of dwarven life, took the first Slayer oath, cutting his beard and spiking his hair before setting off into the northern realm of Chaos to enter the Rift and kill the Chaos gods
He may have cut it, but that is still a glorious beard.
themselves. And Calador Dragon Tamer, fearing what would happen as his friend Ainarian fell further into madness, enacted a great ritual, sacrificing himself and many of the other elven mages to create a magical vortex above Ulthuan that would drain the magic from the world even as it continued to pour in through the polar rifts. And eventually, 1,000 years after the Great Cataclysm, the storm of magic subsided. What followed was an age of recovery. The elves crowned a new Phoenix King, passing over Ainarian and Morathi's son, Malarian, and anointing instead Bel-Shanar, the explorer, who founded colonies of elves across the world, while the dwarves spread through its mountains, some venturing far to the east to Zorn Ozkal, the great skull land between the World's Edge Mountains and the Mountains of Morn. The elves and dwarves in the old world became great allies, trading and pushing back those remnants of the war against chaos to the north and to the deep forests. In the Far East, the lands that had been protected from the predations of chaos by the celestial dragon united as the empire of Grand Cathay and its astromancers brought forth a great warpstone meteorite to ruin the lands of their enemies, the ogres of the mountains.
So Grand Cathay is basically just fantasy China. Got it.
Mountains of Morn, creating a colossal crater known as the Great Maw. But
Sarlacc
this
pit?
new prosperity was about to be plunged into disarray again. Malarian, son of Ainarian and Morathi, assassinated Bel-Shanar and declared himself Phoenix King, and a civil war known as the Sundering broke out amongst the elves. At the height of the war, the Dread King Malarian attempted to unbind the magical vortex and unleash the power of chaos over Ulthuan, but he couldn't control it, and the brief surge of power destroyed his homeland of Nagaraith, fracturing it into the sea. Malarian, Morathi, and their followers were defeated and fled over the seas to the north, to the cold and inhospitable lands of Nagaroth, eventually becoming the Dark Elves. But Malarian carried on plotting. Raiders from Nagaroth attacked dwarven caravans in the old world and cheated the dwarves out of their gold, and when the dwarf High King, Gotrek Starbreaker, sent emissaries to complain to Ulthuan, the new Phoenix King, Calador II, was so enraged he sent the ambassador home with his beard shaved. The resulting War of the Beard lasted 400 years until Calador II was slain and the Phoenix crown claimed as a prize by the dwarfs, and the new Phoenix King, Caradriel, recalled all high elves from the old world, cutting ties with the dwarves and retreating back to Ulthuan. Those elves who chose to remain would eventually abandon the ports and cities and retire to the forest of Athel Loren, becoming the Wood Elves. But while the elves and dwarves fought their wars, a new power rose as the primitive tribes of men in the old world formed their first empires. In minus 2500 by the imperial calendar, during the Sundering, Settra united the great necropolis cities of Nehekhara, founding a dynasty that would last hundreds of years and send its armies all across the world.
Oh, these guys are the kind of sorta Necrons, but not really, but kind of. Glad to see Qatar is still in this world.
500 years later, elven mages from Nagaroth were diverted in a storm and came to Kemri, greatest of the Nehekaran cities, where their knowledge was eagerly absorbed by the Prince of Kemri, a man called Nagash. Nehekara and Gran Cathay weren't the only human empires of the time. The city of Tylos had risen as a trading post of dwarves and men in northern Tilia, a few hundred years after Nehekara. But when its citizens celebrated their success with a great monumental bell, and it tolled for the first time, the population were drowned in a rain of warpstone and a tide of squeaking horror that erupted from its mines, and it was consumed by the blighted marshes.
Oh, the
so although
Skaven.
Nehekara wasn't the only civilization in the old world at that time, it was definitely the longest lived. Maybe that's the wrong choice of words. The kings of Nehekara had long been obsessed by their own mortality, building great pyramids to house their remains, but none had cracked the secrets of eternal life until Nagash, who, as priest king of Kemri, distilled an elixir from human blood to extend his own life, bent the resources of his city to increasing his sorcerous power, and raised legions of skeletons to conquer the whole of Nehekara.
Makes more sense than when the Chinese tried to use mercury for that. It didn't end well. Also, it's theorized that's how gunpowder was discovered. There's a theory that Chinese alchemists were trying to discover an elixir of immortality, and yeah, they accidentally created black powder.
But he underestimated his enemies, and the remaining priest kings of the other cities united against him and eventually defeated him. He fled to Cripple Peak, where he ruled over an empire of degenerate humans and undead as he continued to gather power. The next few centuries were known by the dwarves as the Time of Woes. The elves retreated from the old world, and the dwarves came under attack from hordes of goblins and orcs, and even the first Skaven. Where could they have come from? Who knows? Eventually abandoning their holds on the east of the World's Edge Mountains, it wouldn't be until hundreds of years later that some of the lost eastern holds will be retaken. Back in Nehekara, the stolen tomes of Nagash had been long studied by the nobility of the city of Lamia, who created a lesser version of this elixir, granting themselves unnaturally long life, but also a thirst for the blood of the living. When the rest of the Nehekaran cities united again to drive out these new vampires, they found refuge in the court of Nagash. The great necromancer attacked Nehekara again and again, but united under the priest king Alcadizar the Conqueror, they were defeated until Nagash released a magical plague on the land, striking down everyone except Alcadizar, who was brought in chains to Cripple Peak. But while Nagash prepared a great ritual to resurrect the population of Nehekara as a colossal army of skeletons, Alcadizar was freed by some furry allies and, armed with a blade of horrific power, killed Nagash, escaping with his crown. Don't worry, he'll be back. A lot. Anyway, the ritual was disrupted and Nagash was temporarily killed, but the spell was so powerful the population of Nehekara remained animated under the control of their long-dead Tomb Kings, including the original Tomb King, Settra. For the next 1,000 years, the tribes of men settled in the northern Old World.
So yeah, they are definitely very different from the Necrons, but I can definitely see the overlap. The Necrons were definitely based off of these guys.
World grew and prospered. In the far west, around the forest of Athel Loren, the Bretonni tribes settled, as in the east, the dwarven realms shrank again under constant attack from orcs and goblins until all the mountains between Mad Dog Pass and Karak Eight Peaks were in goblin hands. The dwarves stepped up trade relations with these new human realms, helping Arthur of the Tutor Gens found the city of Middenheim. A few years later, In the lands that would become the Empire, to the Umbarogan tribe, a man called Sigmar was born and became a great friend to the dwarves. He rescued the dwarven king, Kurgan Ironbeard, from orc captivity, receiving Gal Maraz, the Skull Splitter, in return, and together they...
That's it. Guys, he found it. He got the Warhammer. One down, 39,999 to go.
Won the Battle of Blackfire Pass, destroying a colossal orc army and driving the orcs back from human and dwarf lands for years. The following year 0 of this new calendar, a twin-tailed comet was seen in the sky, and the year after, Sigmar was crowned Emperor by the High Priest of Ulrich. The next half-century was something of a golden age for this new empire. Dwarves settled in its lands and contributed to its advancement. Orc and goblin raids were kept at bay, and a huge invasion by a resurrected Nagash campaigning north in search of his lost hat was defeated, and Nagash himself felled by Sigmar at the Battle of the River Reich. After 50 years of rule, Sigmar established the system of elector counts to continue governance of his empire and disappeared into the east. And over the next century, he became revered as a god, the patron god of the new empire as it continued to grow. A few hundred years later, the second great old world civilization of man arose as Gilles le Breton united the tribes of the Bretonnie and drove the orcs and goblins out of their lands, creating the kingdom of Bretonia. The human realms expanded further, but as the second millennium of this new calendar started, they were plagued with decline. And also, like plague, released by the Skaven, the Black Plague swept through the old world, leading to the rise of the necromancer Van Hel in the spooky eastern provinces of the Empire, in the land of Sylvania, where the Skaven waged war with the shambling hordes of zombies. They were both defeated by Count Mandred Skavenslayer, who became emperor, but when he was assassinated in 1152, the courts wouldn't agree on a new emperor, and so the empire split into a number of separate factions. In 1494, the final human kingdom of this era emerged as the Khan Queen Mishka led the Gospodars through the High Pass and drove back the Ungol tribes. Her daughter would become the first Tsarina of Kislev and a bulwark against chaos invasion. But in the empire...
Oh, you play as them in the tutorial of Total War Warhammer 3. That's cool.
The split only worsened as more electors declared themselves the real inheritor of Sigmar, weakening the land as it came under attack again and again from the same old foes. In 1680...
So the Empire sounds a lot like the Holy Roman Empire with its elector counts and everything. The HRE was founded by Charlemagne, more or less. And then over time, it became this just geopolitical mess of counties, duchies, bishoprics, so on and so forth. And the Holy Roman Emperor was elected by these electors, of which King George III was actually one at one point. And it was just a complete mess, but it was also one of the most important political entities in European history.
81, Nagash returned, 1666 years after being banished by Sigmar, and towns and villages across the empire were destroyed by undead hordes. A few years later, the orc War Ironclaw devastated the southern province of Solent, leaving it in ruins. And when the few independent elector counts, the ones not claiming to be an emperor, elected Margreta of Marienburg as the new empress in 1979, the decision was so controversial, the Grand Theogonist of Sigmar refused the appointment. Sigmar's old empire was all but in ruins. The only time a semblance of unity was shown was in 2145, when the various factions united temporarily to defeat Vlad von Carstein, a vampire count who had slowly taken control of Sylvania again over the last few hundred years. And so we arrive in 2276, where this history comes to an end. The empire is fractured. 4 different rulers vying for the throne and beset on all sides. Though in the west, the kingdom of Bretonnia is stronger than ever under the rule of Luon Orcslayer. The Wood Elves guard their woodland realm, though the High Elves, under the rule of Finubar the Seafarer, have slowly reopened relations with these new realms, trading with the Empire, Bretonnia, and the distant lands of Cathay. In the south, the reawakened Tomb King, Settra, continues his march of conquest, assaulting the Bretonian client states known as the Border Princes, but for now, Nagash is seldom seen, and the vampire counts have recently been defeated, at least for a while. In the mountains and passes, the dwarves still hold out against hordes of invading orcs and goblins, though a civil war in the Skaven Under-Empire has raged for so long that the loathsome rat men are little more than furry myths. And in the far north, in the realm of chaos, magic still pours into the world, and the forces of the ruinous powers are mobilizing once more. And that's it. We're up to speed. The era in which the old world is set is one that's never really been investigated in detail before. The old Warhammer Fantasy setting was set around the early 2500s, about 250 years after all this. In that history, all this stuff was the prelude to another great war against chaos that would see the Empire reunited, but we're going to have to wait to find out if that turns out the same way. For now, hopefully that's got you in the mood for some gaming in the world of legend. I'm certainly ready to unite everyone under the beneficent and bony thumb of the Tomb Kings, and I'll do more of these as the factions are released. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so I think I have a good idea of everything that led up to Total War now. It definitely seems a lot less grimdark than 40k is. Fantasy seems more like it's going for realism. Like, this is just how people naturally react throughout history, but with things like magic thrown into the mix. So naturally the consequences are going to be a little worse. Whereas in 40k, it's just Murphy's Law thrown into overdrive. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong, and it will go so spectacularly wrong, it'll almost be comical. I'll probably watch a few more videos about this just to get a better idea of what's going on. If y'all have any recommendations, feel free to let me know, and I'll probably check it out. Thanks. Bye.